When Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez first came to Washington, she was famously picking fights with establishment figures like Nancy Pelosi and regularly bucking Washington norms. But according to Politico, the Congresswoman is now declining to back primary challengers who are following in her footsteps, and it seems to be working more within the system of Congress.
So what happened, or did anything happen? And is the switch overblown? The Intercept's D.C. Bureau Chief Ryan Grimm shares his thoughts with us by Skype. Ryan, it's great to see you.
Guys.
Hey, man. So, Ryan, we saw you tweeting and engaging this a little. Sorry, what happened? Oh, okay. They want me to intro you again. 1 second. Right. So what happened to AOC? Is the establishment switch overblown? The Intercept's D.C. Bureau Chief Ryan Grimm, he shares his thoughts with us via Skype. Good to see you, Ryan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Ryan, so you were tweeting a little bit about this, about whether this Politico article was overblown or not. Neera Tanden and James Carville are praising AOC. Is anything happening here? Is it a different method and change of leading the left from AOC and Bernie Sanders in your view? Or is this entire thing just a nothing?
I think there is a strategic shift that's going on that is legitimate to debate, to comment on, to observe. I think the frame of her splitting with Bernie Sanders or diverging from Bernie Sanders isn't exactly the right one. The way I would think about it more is diverging more from AOC 2018 and the kind of Justice Democrat strategy of direct confrontation with party leadership and Democratic incumbents versus AOC, Representative AOC here in 2020. There is genuine daylight between those two strategies, and I think it's fair to observe that. I think where it gets strange is people think of Bernie Sanders as this kind of outsider, burn it down type, but he is in fact a member of the Senate Democratic leadership. He has never, as far as I can find, ever picked a fight with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, or Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid throughout his career. Just recently, the flamethrower he took to the Senate floor was on behalf of Democratic leadership, executing on this corporate bailout package, which also included lots of relief for working people, which is what he was fighting for. But he was a team player in the end. So in some ways, it's almost unfair from AOC's perspective to be compared to Sanders, and why aren't you more like Sanders, who's willing to burn it all down? Because Sanders actually isn't trying to burn it all down.
She's being compared to the sort of imagined caricature of Bernie versus the reality of how he's actually operated in the Senate. But so dig into what you think those differences are, though, between the 2018 AOC strategy and today.
So 2018, I mean, one of the first things she said, standing on the bar stool at her victory night party was, okay, this is just the beginning. Next we're going to elect Ayanna Pressley. We're going to take on Capuano in Boston. We're going to elect Cori Bush. We're going to knock out Lacey Clay in St. Louis. She and Bernie Sanders campaigned for and Brent Welder out in Kansas City. And what you see this time around is a lot more of the Brent Welder stuff and much less of the Cori Bush, Ayanna Pressley. And the difference there, Brent Welder was running in an open seat, in an open primary against Sharice Davids and others trying to flip a Republican seat. That she's continuing to do. What she's not doing anymore is endorsing people like Cori Bush or like Ayanna Pressley who are running against incumbents. In fact, Cori Bush herself, who I wish her well, she's suffering from the flu right now, is running again against Lacey Clay, and AOC has not yet endorsed her. She endorsed Jessica Cisneros against Cuellar. That was a fairly easy one. She did it late. She did it after even Emily's List had endorsed Cisneros. She endorsed Marie Newman. Marie Newman was another kind of obvious one. The entire kind of progressive establishment got behind Marie Newman against Daniel Lipinski, and Newman ended up winning. But beyond that, she hasn't taken on any incumbents, and she also has kind of stepped away from her more direct challenging of House Democratic leadership. She now refers to Nancy Pelosi sometimes as the mama bear of the House Democratic caucus, after saying she was going to support Barbara Lee for Speaker instead, and after having employed staffers who would publicly directly challenge Pelosi. Those staffers are gone for the most part, and replaced with a style that is more collaborative with leadership.
Well, I find that interesting, Ryan, because something that you pushed for, and I remember when you interviewed Bernie Sanders, he was trying to wrap you. Even whenever you were asking him, you were like, well, what about the House Ways and Means chairman? Are you going to do anything about that? Because it's always been understood that, talk is great, but you have to actually challenge the physical barriers of the chairman and of so much of the Democratic leadership. And look, the right is the same way. So why is it that somebody like AOC, who seemed to understand that in the beginning, has shifted her view towards something where, look, adopting this strategy is never generally conducive to instituting really big change, especially as a younger member of Congress?
I think the left is just going to have to grapple with the reality that elected officials are not going to be the leaders of their outside insurgent revolution. Your point about Sanders is a good one. When I interviewed him and AOC together, I pressed them both on a number of these primary challenges, trying to ask when the rubber hits the road of this political revolution. For instance, like you said, Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal is extraordinarily hostile to Medicare for All, didn't even want to have a hearing on it. He is kind of a choke point. It has to go through the Ways and Means Committee. He was finally pressured into having a hearing, and as we reported, he told all his committee members, don't use the words Medicare for All, even though this is a Medicare for All hearing. Meanwhile, he's being challenged by Alex Morse, a local mayor there, whose city, under his leadership, passed a resolution calling for Medicare for All. He's kind of running his campaign on Medicare for All. He has the support of a lot of organs of the progressive movement, but neither AOC nor Bernie Sanders have endorsed him, even though he's running quite a credible campaign. And that has to do with the internal dynamics of the institutions that AOC and Bernie Sanders both serve in. There's an extraordinary amount of pressure on them, not to take on incumbent elected officials. I think they should continue to be pushed to do that, but the left also has to find other paths to oust incumbents that are in the way of progressive legislation that don't involve sitting members of Congress, because you're going to continue to be disappointed by the way that the institution pushes them to back off of those types of pressure campaigns.
Yeah. Well, it's just remarkable to see, because frankly, the 2018 AOC strategy was remarkably successful. Here she was, freshman member of Congress, and essentially, I don't want to say single-handedly, because she had a massive movement that had been organizing around the Green New Deal behind her, but the fact that she was willing to go and protest outside of Speaker Pelosi's office forced that issue into the center of the debate. She's also the person who really raised this question of, should billionaires exist, right? That became a central point of conversation in the Congress and in the presidential campaign. She became the single most powerful, you could argue, freshman member of Congress that we've certainly ever seen, because she was willing to challenge her own side. So, to me, it's a real loss if she's moving away from that strategy, because it has been so powerful and so effective.
Yeah, she really scared the heck out of people, and she was able to push people in a progressive direction without even trying to do so. Incumbents throughout 2020 and 2018 also were seeing monsters in every closet, and as soon as somebody registered to challenge them in a primary, and there were more than 100 primary challengers, or there are more than 100 primary challengers this cycle, they immediately assumed that this was an AOC plot, almost always incorrectly, but the fear that was exhibited there then expressed itself in them behaving in a more progressive way. And so if they start to lose some of that fear, and if they start to feel like that they can go back to their 2016 levels of comfort in incumbency, then that is going to be a loss for pressuring people to the left.
So let me ask you this, Ryan. If Joe Biden becomes president, how does all this shake out? How does this work? Would being conciliatory mean that some of that, they'll be like, oh, well, they were conciliatory when it mattered, so maybe we'll give them a bone now? Or is it to make people run scared? As you say, what's the best way to actually accomplish the ideals that you say you're true to?
I mean, you can go back to that famous Frederick Douglass quote that, power concedes nothing without demand. Power is not in the habit of conceding things just to be nice, just to be friendly. They don't hand over the keys to the kingdom because they like the way that somebody has been behaving. Quite the opposite. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. The Tea Party throughout the 2010s was the one that was getting catered to not because Paul Ryan or Kevin McCarthy or John Boehner liked anybody in the Freedom Caucus. They despised those people actually, but they understood that they had to reckon with them, or else they were gonna pay a price. And so, if leadership doesn't think that they're gonna have to pay a price, then they'll just continue to roll on. And so, it depends on how the election shapes out and what brings Joe Biden to the White House, if that is what happens. But if he feels like he can get things done without the left, then he'll happily roll them all day long.
Yeah, and you see moderates and, third way types are willing to go much harder and say, our people, we may stay home, we may vote for the other side, never Trump Republicans saying, we're not going to vote for Bernie Sanders, anyone but Trump and Bernie. And because they're willing to do that, they get much more out of the party than the left, who is presumed, oh, you guys have no other choice, so you have to show up for us, so we're going to give you absolutely nothing. Ryan, it's great to have your analysis on this. It's also great to hear your kiddos in the background. Hope everybody's doing good.
Great talking to you, Ryan. See you, man.
Same here.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have more Rising for you after this.